Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast that comes to you from Calgary in Canada. I'm Gaurav Sawant. You've just had the successful conclusion of the G7 summit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi set the record straight. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was to have a meeting with the US President Donald Trump, but that meeting could not take place because Donald Trump rushed to Washington DC. He in fact invited Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Washington DC, but was there a trap there? Remember, General Asim Munir was already in Washington DC when Prime Minister Narendra Modi was invited. Of course, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said he has other commitments, he cannot make it right now, but he set the record straight on Operation Sindur. There was no US intervention for ceasefire. There was no talk of trade, and he said that in as many words to the US President. I'll get you more on that story. We'll also talk about escalating tensions between Israel and Iran, the big escalation in conflict.
Modi dials Donald Trump. Calls US truce bluff. "35 minutes of Prime Minister plain speak for Trump." Operation Sindur message loud and clear. Prime Minister sets ceasefire record straight. That is a big focus on India first.
It was Indian military action that forced Pakistan to seek a ceasefire, no US intervention, and there was absolutely no conversation on trade. The Prime Minister's plain speak is something we'll talk about in greater detail during the course of the next 1 hour. But we will also talk about US President Donald Trump reiterating that Iran should surrender. And the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he's made a statement saying if the US were to dive into this conflict, there would be irreparable consequences for that. Massive, massive escalation. Say various places in Tehran are being pounded even as we speak. But then Tehran is also targeting Tel Aviv. I'll get you more on that. And I want to get you more details of what Prime Minister Narendra Modi's conversation with Donald Trump was like. 35-minute long conversation shot by the United States of America. So it was Donald Trump, because there was to be a meeting on the sidelines of G7 between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump, and Donald Trump had to rush back. He sort of phone conversation with Prime Minister Modi. He asked Prime Minister Narendra Modi if he could come to Washington DC on his way back from Canada to India, but the Prime Minister said no because he was to go to Croatia he had a meeting in Zagreb. But the Prime Minister gave details of Operation Sindur and reiterated US had no role to play whatsoever in stopping the war. It was India's military action targeting multiple Pakistani Air Force bases, making them completely inoperable, that Pakistan sought a ceasefire, because the next round would have been even worse, the military punitive strikes from India. Listen into India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri give minute-by-minute details of what transpired.
You had no role in India-Pakistan ceasefire. No mention of trade in talks with US. India can hit Pakistan harder for terror. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's hard-hitting phone call with US President Donald Trump. 35 minutes of telephonic conversation which demolished Trump's repeated claims of brokering India-Pakistan truce. Prime Minister Modi told Donald Trump that India has opted for ceasefire only after Pakistan begged and groveled.
पूरे घटनाक्रम के दौरान कभी भी किसी भी स्तर पर भारत अमेरिका ट्रेड डील या अमेरिका द्वारा भारत और पाकिस्तान के बीच मध्यस्थता जैसे विषयों पर बात नहीं हुई थी। सैन्य कार्रवाई रोकने की बात सीधे भारत और पाकिस्तान के बीच दोनों सेनाओं की एग्जिस्टिंग चैनल्स के माध्यम से हुई थी और पाकिस्तान के ही आग्रह पर हुई थी।
Modi's message to Trump was clear. that India's bold new doctrine will consider terror attacks as not proxy war, but war. Modi also conveyed that India has picked only terror hubs for strikes. Prime Minister Modi also declined a request by President Trump for an impromptu stopover at White House after the G7 meet, citing prior engagements. He, however, invited Donald Trump to visit India, which the US president has accepted.
पूर्व निर्धारित कार्यक्रमों के कारण प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने अपनी असमर्थता व्यक्त की। दोनों लीडर्स ने तब तय किया कि वे निकट भविष्य में मिलने का प्रयास करेंगे।
Will the phone call redefine Modi-Trump dosti, which has been tested by Donald Trump actively quoting Pakistan? Bureau Report, India Today.
And joining me now on this India Today special broadcast is Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, former top diplomat. Sandeep Unithan, my colleague, remains with me on the show. In a moment, we'll be joined by Professor Andrew Latham, an expert on international relations. Ambassador Sajjanhar, your understanding of Donald Trump reiterating that he's not getting enough credit for stopping the war, and he still insists he stopped the war. You heard what Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri said. US had absolutely no role to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Gaurav. I think we have heard Donald Trump not once, not twice, but several times over. And we made our point of view clear. I think we really need to move forward. Let Donald Trump say what he wants to say. I think the relationship is much broader than this. We have made our point. I think the world knows it. That is why, nothing has been written on this. If the world trusted what Donald Trump was saying, there would have been sheaves and reams of paper and ink that would have been spent on this. The world doesn't trust him. The world believes what happened on the ground, that it is Pakistan which came on bent knees to India, asking for a ceasefire, asking for a cessation of hostilities, and we accepted, we agreed to that. So I think there are so many other areas of cooperation and collaboration with the United States. We don't need to expend our energy, focus on this thing. We need to move forward, whether it is, I think the Prime Minister and Mr. Trump spoke
unless
about...
Unless, of course, Sandeep, yes. Sir, give me a moment. Sandeep, it just appears Donald Trump is desperate for a success story. He hasn't had one. Not Russia, Ukraine, that he had boasted about, that even before he enters White House, there would be a ceasefire. Russia continues to pound Ukraine. Israel-Iran conflict has started. Now a man who claims to be a deal maker and a peacemaker is actually sending in fighter jets into the region and aircraft carrier battle groups. It just appears he's desperate for one success story, and he's claiming success where he has had no role to play.
Well, absolutely, Gaurav. In fact, as you correctly pointed out, Donald Trump is a man who promised to end conflicts even before he entered the White House. It's been 6 months now, Gaurav, and there's, in fact, the number of conflicts have increased. Iran and Israel are at war. That's the newest conflict that's raging on for almost a week now. Donald Trump has been unable to stop anything, and no one seems to be listening to him. Therefore, he's coming out with this, as what Ambassador Sajjanhar said. He's been repeating it ad nauseum. And Donald Trump, as we know, Gaurav, is a man who never allows facts to come in the way of an interesting story. Now, that interesting story of his has been called out in no uncertain terms by the Foreign Secretary Misri today, in some of the strongest language that we've seen India use for its relationship with the United States. And I think India has said that enough is enough, and he keeps on going on with this thing of having mediated and used trade and all of those things. And I think, something has snapped there in that statement that, India should, and arguably that statement should have come out a long time ago, Gaurav, but I think the timing was right. It was today. They preempted the luncheon meeting between General
in India,
Field Marshal Munir and President Trump. So this was India taking preemptive diplomatic action with that statement, Gaurav.
And a very strong statement that came in from Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri. But, when you mentioned that preemptive strike, it was also a trap that was being laid for India. Ambassador Sajanhar, the manner in which Donald Trump said that, he made that phone call, sought a conversation with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and said, why don't you come to Washington, D.C.? And then with Asim Munir in White House, he would have tried to get the two leaders together, and then he would have claimed another victory, and Pakistan would have gone home claiming victory, because Pakistan says they had a ceasefire because America promised them a dialogue with India. India clearly did not fall into the American trap.
No, absolutely. I think if Prime Minister Modi had been in Washington, D.C. and Asim Munir was also there, this would have, been shown as some sort of an equivalence between the two countries. And that is something that we are loath about, the manner in which Donald Trump has spoken about two great leaders, two great countries, two making great products, etc. So this is jarring, because obviously one is a perpetrator of terrorism, one is a victim. And there is no comparison between these two countries. India's GDP is 13 times as much as Pakistan. Only the state of Tamil Nadu's, that GDP is more than that of Pakistan. State of Maharashtra's GDP is more than that of Pakistan. So there is no comparison between the two, and I'm very happy that Prime Minister Modi looked through this ruse and he sort of, declined there. But, again, I think we need to focus, we need to take note of the fact, the reasons why Donald Trump has invited Asim Munir, and the preventive actions that we will need to take, Gaurav. That's very important, because, this is going to embolden Munir and, all these other things. He's got extra medals, he's become a field marshal and all that sort of things. And he feels that the country is behind him and the United States is standing with him. China, of course, is with him. So he might feel more emboldened that, he can continue with these antics of his, these tactics of his, what he did. And he will be able to sort of, get away with it. I think India needs to disabuse him of any of that, thinking, any of that understanding. And we'll have to really think deep. Meaning, of course, one can say that it is between Pakistan and the United States, because, exactly, I think you mentioned, Sandeep mentioned that there is the cryptocurrency deal between the two of them. There is the rare earth minerals deals with them. There's also the possibility of getting bases there in Pakistan for these operations against Iran that is hotting up. So all those considerations are there, but Donald Trump might have his own reasons, but all of it has an impact on India, and India needs to be very conscious and mindful of that and
the
take
big thing
preventive
is
steps. Yes, Gaurav.
Oh, absolutely. The good thing is that Indian political, diplomatic and political leadership, they've learned so much from past mistakes, Sandeep, because Sandeep and I and Ambassador Sajanhar, we watched in horror, absolute horror, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee recognized Pervez Musharraf, a military dictator, as president, gave him Tri-Services Guard of Honor, let him come to Agra for that summit, which was a disaster. And why? Because American interests in Afghanistan had to be protected, is the narrative that was given to us at that point of time. And Pervez Musharraf, who promised that his territory will never be used for terror against India, it targeted our parliament, it targeted our temples, including Akshardham temple and Raghunath temple, targeted, so many other places in our country. Terror continued again with Dr. Manmohan Singh, 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks, and the disaster at Sharm el-Sheikh. Again, we were told there was global pressure for dialogue with Pakistan. I'm so glad in 2025, Sandeep, India is strong enough to say, नहीं बात करनी एक आतंकवादी देश के साथ. He has to stop terror first.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And I keep saying that we still haven't understood the implications of Operation Sindur and the Prime Minister's message on the 12th of May. Where he called out Pakistan's state sponsorship of terror, Gaurav, and the fact that he said there would be no distinction between the state and the non-state. Nuclear blackmail would have to end, and any attack against India would be met with force, by military force, would be considered a war on India. These are very, very big red lines that the Prime Minister has drawn, which is why I say that Operation Sindur and the Prime Minister's three statements, the new doctrine of India's war on terror is possibly our biggest strategic statements after Pokhran of 1998. We have called out Pakistan's state sponsorship of terror. Everything that the Pakistan military has carefully constructed, this facade of the state and the non-state actors and nuclear blackmail, all of that collapsed on the 10th of May, Gaurav. You're looking at a new India, very assertive, which is not afraid to call out the bully in the room, even if it's the American president, which is what the Prime Minister seems to have done with that phone call today, Gaurav.
Oh, absolutely, because this is perhaps a situation, Ambassador Sajjanhar. The Prime Minister is telling the world about India's power. Realize India's power and treat India. And it's not that we expect the world treats us because of the way we are, and we've proven our mettle in the world. Operation Sindur, or before that, post Galwan, our operations have indicated our military strength, our economic strength, our political strength, and as a nation, the way we come. Is that the appreciation? Because when I spoke to several people here, they see India in completely different light in today's day and age, Ambassador Sajjanhar. But what do you make of this new love for Pakistan? You know, Donald Trump in 2019 was calling Pakistan the biggest cheat. They've cheated America out of $33 billion and they've killed American people and all of that. And suddenly he says, I love Pakistan. Or does he love money more than he loves peace?
No, absolutely. I think you're right. You know, he is more driven by personal interest, personal financial interest, and even as far as, you know, if one wants to be a little charitable to him, say, you know, even as far as the US national interests are concerned because of the position that he's taking on Iran. So, you know, this has all moved together. But you're very right. You know, 2017, Gaurav, you look at the national security strategy, national defense strategy. It is very categorically stated, you know, we don't really need to go even that far, or to the tweet of 1st January 2018 that you are referring to, that, you know, we've given $33 billion and they have treated all the US leaders like fools, and that is not going to continue. And, you know, they are providing safe havens to all these terrorists. So, you know, that has been very clear. But even he changed, of course, the tune when Imran Khan came there, said he will negotiate, he'll mediate on Kashmir, and he again told a falsehood that Prime Minister Modi has requested him to mediate on Kashmir. You recall that in the Oval Office, that's what he comment that he made. Basically, because he wanted to reach out to the Taliban at that time, and he wanted to get out of Afghanistan. So it might be personal interest, but, you know, come now to 13th of February, you look at the joint declaration that was signed when Prime Minister Modi was there. The name of Jaish, the name of Lashkar, the name of Hizbul Mujahideen, all this is mentioned that Pakistan needs to take action against 2611 suspects. You know, all these developments about critical minerals, about cryptocurrency, etc., they, I think, have happened after that, as we have read reports on that. And that is what has motivated him to change all that. That having been said, you know, it doesn't change our own plans, because as Sandeep was saying, and I very much agree, and what you have mentioned also, Gaurav, India has demonstrated not only its capacity, but also its intention to punish Pakistan if there is a repetition of such, such an action. And I think India has also demonstrated that it is not going to look at the world either for approval or permission or, look over its shoulder to see what the other countries are thinking. India knows what it needs to do. India will do it to protect its own sovereignty, to protect its own interest, irrespective of what. And the world takes note of that. You would recall that when Operation Sindur started on the 7th morning, there was one country only which expressed regret, that is China. No other country said anything that India should not have done it, India needs to sort of, withdraw this, that, and the other. No country made a remark. They acknowledged that India has the right to protect its interests, and India has India will go forward and do what it thinks is best for its interests.
And Sandeep, right now, as America looks to, as many argue, join this war against Iran, the assets that are being moved into West Asia, whether it's 3 aircraft carrier battle groups or the B-2 bombers with their GBU-57 hardware, or the 3 dozen tankers, mid-air refuelers with the F-15s, F-16s and F-35s moving to West Asia. How does Pakistan or Pakistani airspace and air bases fit into the wider American war game? Is it just ISR, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, or is there a bigger role, Sandeep?
Well, Gaurav, it's possible that Pakistan could allow the use of its airspace for, American aircraft to fly through and attack, Iran. And this has happened in the past. Both of us have covered the war in Afghanistan, where you saw, F-18 aircraft from carrier strike groups in the Arabian Sea taking off and bombing Afghanistan over Pakistani airspace. You saw B-52s and B-2s taking off from Diego Garcia and attacking Afghanistan again. Now, this is a similar thing. If the United States gets involved in Iran, Gaurav, then it's quite possible that Pakistan will have to either give its air bases to the United States, as it has done in the past during the global war on terror, or allow for its its airspace to be used as transit, or cut the border escape of Iranian government officials or troops or anything of that sort. All of these contingencies would definitely have been mapped by CENTCOM, Gaurav, and that explains the kind of ask that Donald Trump has possibly of General Field Marshal Asim Munir. And Pakistan's geolocation, geographical location, Gaurav, is something that the generals at Rawalpindi have always used, right from Field Marshal Ayub in 1958, when he allowed the U-2 flights to take off from Peshawar to fly over China and USSR, right down to present day Field Marshal Asim Munir, another Field Marshal. Pakistan is a rentier state, and it has always charged a premium rent for its geopolitical, for its geographic location. And that seems to be the case here. And it'll be very interesting to know what President Trump asks of Munir in the White House. Is definitely going to be something that's related to the emerging situation with the Iran-Israel war, Gaurav.
Will he ask or will he dictate? Sandeep, is the big question, because usually people don't ask their servants, they tell their servants what needs to be done. And Asim Munir is a little more than an American vassal, used to be a Chinese vassal or remains a Chinese vassal too. But I want to understand from you, Ambassador Sajanhar, America is a strategic partner. But when a strategic partner speaks in its interests and not in our interests too, then somewhere down the line, is this relationship more transactional, or is there a difference between what the president says and what the State Department says and what the US, Pacific Command does on ground? Are they all on the same page, or are they now running with the hare and hunting with hounds?
As far as the differentiation that you seek to make between the State Department and the President, I don't think today there is any, because none of these, cabinet members of the Trump cabinet, they have any independent standing, they have any independent clout. They are there because Trump has positioned them there.
We are getting the first visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi landing in Zagreb, the first visit ever of an Indian Prime Minister to Croatia, a very, very significant visit. This is a very significant visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Croatia. This is the first time ever since Croatia became an independent country in 1991 that an Indian Prime Minister has visited. And do keep in mind, Zoran Milanovic, the Prime Minister of Croatia, is seen as a very close ally of India. Croatia has always stood by India on various issues, including on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. When you talk about the India-Middle East Europe economic corridor, Croatia again on the Adriatic Sea will be playing a very significant role, whether it's geostrategic ties, whether it's defense ties, whether it's India gaining an important foothold in the Balkans. All of this is very, very significant, and the Prime Minister made it a point that when he was going to Cyprus and then to Canada, on the way back to stop by at Croatia and take this relationship to another level. More important than going to Washington, D.C. and meeting President Donald Trump at a time when Asim Munir was also at the White House. That's a discussion for another time. But Ambassador Sajjanar and Sandeep, many thanks for joining me. Welcome back. There's massive escalation in the Israel-Iran war, and the United States, statements being made by the United States, has added fuel to fire. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, has warned the United States of irreparable damage in case the US were to directly enter the Israel-Iran war. He did make it very clear there is no question of surrender. Iran will not surrender. Remember, Donald Trump, the US president, had repeatedly put a message on his social media platform, Truth Social, where he said his patience was wearing thin and that he wanted Iran to surrender. Initially, the conversation was about a ceasefire, but then it suddenly became all about surrender and not a ceasefire. And Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has said there is no question of a surrender. And if the US were to join combat, the consequences for the US would be irreparable damage.
Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction, why didn't you negotiate? I said to the people, why didn't you negotiate with me 2 weeks ago? You could have done fine. You would have had a country. It's very sad to watch this. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It's so, everyone thought it was going to be the reverse. I didn't think so. And I was telling them, you gotta do something. You gotta negotiate. And at the end, last minute, they said, no, we're not going to do that. And they got hit. Remember 60 days? And then came the 60. 61 is going to become a very famous number. That was one hell of a hit. That first hit, that was one hell of a hit. Not sustainable, to be honest. That's where
So the first hit was one hell of a hit. There is no denying that fact, but subsequently, Iran too continues to strike back, and this is happening at a time when the US is moving in additional military hardware into West Asia, whether it's 3 aircraft carrier battle groups, including one that's completing its tour of duty in the South China Sea, navigating the Indo-Pacific and moving towards the Mediterranean Sea. There are leaders in Iran who warned that the Hormuz Strait will be blocked, but 3 aircraft carrier battle groups would technically mean that more than 40 to 50 warships, submarines and hundreds of additional fighter jets on board on all 3 aircraft carrier battle groups, electronic intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, aircraft, fighter jets, helicopters, all of that moving into this battle zone. What's really happening in the war on day 6? We get you more in this report.
Unconditional surrender, thundered Trump to Iran's supreme leader. But the US president's warning has triggered a completely opposite reaction from Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In his first television address since Donald Trump threatened to kill Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei has warned America of irreparable damage if it chose to enter the West Asia war.
It was suspected from the beginning that America was also involved in this malicious move of the Zionist regime. But with these recent statements that they are making, this suspicion is being strengthened day by day. The Iranian nation stands firm against the imposed war. The damage America will suffer if it makes a military intervention in this field will undoubtedly be irreparable.
Soon after Trump's Truth Social post, where the US president said that his patience was wearing thin, Khamenei posted on X, "The battle begins." He also shared a picture referencing the Battle of Khaybar, alluding to Imam Ali's conquest of the Jewish town of Khaybar in the 7th century. With the image of a man holding a sword entering a castle, Khamenei drew parallels between Ali's triumph over Jews and Iran's current stance. Iran continues to harden its stance, despite Trump declaring that Israel has full control of Iran's skies. Soon after Khamenei's address, Israeli jets reportedly struck Lavizan, the exact Tehran neighborhood that the supreme leader is rumored to be hiding in. All eyes now are on Donald Trump's next move. Will he join the war against Iran? And will the West Asia war then escalate into a bigger regional conflict? Bureau Report, India Today.
A bigger regional conflict, or could this actually escalate into Third World War, is the apprehension that many analysts are expressing across the world. But look at Iran. If people thought that Iran would fold within a day or two, that clearly is not happening. Despite the military superiority or the air superiority of the Israeli forces, Iran continues to strike back and strike hard, including now using its Fateh hypersonic hypersonic missile. That's the information that's coming in. Of course, there is very little that can prevent a hypersonic missile which travels 5 to 6 times the speed of sound. It can almost never be intercepted, and the damage caused is immense. We get you more in this report.
Another day of escalating Israel-Iran conflict. Both nations have made their intent clear. They will be relentless not to be on the back foot. Israel continues to batter targets across Iran. Israeli army struck a nuclear facility used to manufacture centrifuges in Tehran. The facility was used to expand the scale and speed of its uranium enrichment. In the counter-strike, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps launched hypersonic Fateh-1 missiles at Israel.
عملیاتی که تاکنون اجرا شده صرفاً هشدار برای بازدارندگی بوده است و عملیات تنبیهی به زودی اجرا خواهد شد. به جد به ساکنین سرزمین‌های اشغالی به ویژه تل‌آویو و حیفا هشدار داده می شود برای حفظ جان خود این مناطق رو ترک کنند و خودشون رو قربانی امیال حیوانی نتانیاهو نکنند.
We are now on day 5 of Operation Rising Lion. We've struck deep, hitting Iran's nuclear, ballistic, and command capabilities. The Iranian regime has spent years getting closer to a nuclear weapon. They have spent billions building a ballistic missile program. Our mission is clear: to remove the threat at its source. We are aiming at military targets. They are attacking civilian homes. The IDF will continue to operate with precision, strength, and resolve to ensure the safety of the people of Israel.
Amid the full-scale escalations, Israel is reportedly running low on defense Arrow missile interceptors, which are crucial to counter barrage of Iranian missile strikes. A day earlier, Trump had asked the Iranian regime for an unconditional surrender. In his retort, Iran's supreme leader said the war has just begun, indicating that Iran is not going to give in. Iran also made it clear that any intervention would be a recipe for an all-out war. America has mobilized more war assets in the Middle East. sending its fighter jets to active duty near bases close to the Persian Gulf. All eyes are now on America's next move. Is this pointing at a much wider war? Bureau Report, India Today.
I want to quickly bring into this conversation Dr. Vail Awad, a very senior journalist who understands this region very well. My colleague Sandeep Punithan stays with me on this broadcast. Dr. Awad, your appreciation of Donald Trump reiterating surrender and Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, saying no question of surrender. If America joins the war, there will be irreparable damage. What do you make of this?
Well, I think we all know that he has given the green signal to Netanyahu to attack and the preemptive strike. He was fully aware of it. You remember he was already evacuating the American Marines families from the Gulf state. They say unnecessarily staying there a week before the attack. And they had a round of talk in Sunday in Muscat in Oman. And then 2 days before the talk, he already, Netanyahu took the full advantage into a preemptive strike. And this strike, as you know, it's not meant for the nuclear side. I mean, 300 targets inside Iran was not meant. They removed generals, they removed scientists, they killed civilians, and they thought that there will be an overall revolt inside Iran and the government will fall. So it's a regime change, then followed by the question of the nuclear side. That is what the objective of the whole operation actually.
And that objective, Sandeep, still remains unfulfilled because given the fact that Iran's able to use its Fateh-1 hypersonic missiles, or at least that's the information that's coming in from Tehran, it means even 6 days later, Tehran has not folded.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And, you know, we forget the number of missiles that Iran has. It has over 3,000 ballistic missiles by one estimate. And while Israel has said that it's taken out 1/3 of Iran's launchers and its capability to launch ballistic missiles, there's still 2/3 of those launchers that are out there and possibly dispersed across Iran's geography. And that explains the continuing strikes at Israel. So it's literally, a battle of attrition, Gaurav, that Iran has begun. Israel has, of course, been fighting this war of attrition from the 7th of October 2023, but Iran is playing that same game again now with Israel and, continuing to fire these ballistic missiles, these hypersonic missiles, as we're just showing our viewers on screen, which are, almost impossible to intercept. Iran has plenty more of those, hypersonic missiles, Gaurav, and it's a matter of who runs out of missiles first. And, there is a limit to Israel's the interceptor missiles that it has in its arsenal. We are seeing estimates of 10 to 12 days of interceptor missiles. And Iran's signaling by this that it can go on for several more days, Gaurav. And the regime is also signaled. The Supreme Leader Khamenei's statement today seems to suggest that they're not folding up, they're not buckling, they're not surrendering unconditionally the way President Donald Trump wants them to. So there's still a lot of fight left in Iran, Gaurav.
Is that also your appreciation, Dr. Awad? Iran has a lot of fight left in it. A large number of hypersonic missiles, ballistic missiles, though their aircraft, their fighter jets, their air bases, to a very large extent unusable. The fact that Israel claims it has total air superiority or air supremacy in this region. If America were to step in and use their B-2 bombers and their GBU-57 bombs to take out the Fordo nuclear facility, would that signal that Iran cannot go on?
Well, let's remember, Gaurav, that Iran was under fire and it was attacked by another nation who is a undeclared nuclear state, having more than 90 nuclear arsenals, and attacking a state which is ambitious, maybe, in the future of having a nuclear weapon, which is already the peaceful discussion was with the IAEA. And everybody knows that the IAEA, even they have claimed since 2024 that Iran does not have the nuclear bomb. So is it seriously the nuclear bomb or no? So Iran knows that it has been, look at the West Asia, Gaurav, and you've been following the development from Gaza Strip to Lebanon, to Syria, to Iraq. Now Iran only left in this region to continue to conquer the whole of the West Asia. Because once you have the control on the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, then you are putting lots of pressure on country like India, China, Korea, who's depending mainly on the 40% supply lines from these places. So it's not that to see the war in isolation from Iran or the voice of Iran and Israel or US and Iran, because Iran is a geopolitically very important state for the north-south corridor, which we know from Russia, Azerbaijan, Iran, and India. And then also we have a corridor of the BRI from China. So it is the importance of presence of Iran is still a hurdle for the Israeli dominance in the region. So Iran have been preparing since 1979. When the revolution took over and then Khamenei came to power, he has been building their arms and self-reliance because the American fooled them and ditched them and give all their nuclear program. By the way, Gaurav, you know that the nuclear program of Iran was started by the United States from 1950 to 1979, and including Germany, France, and also UK. And then when the revolution took over, they halted the program. They give all the data to Saddam Hussein, who bombed the Bushehr reactors, which was the American provided to Iran. So what I'm trying to say here is that Iran knew that it is the only country left in this region where Israel is unable to achieve its objective. They were able to attack Syria. They were able to attack Lebanon, attack Houthis, because there is no retaliation. Here you miscalculated Iran potential power. Iran have not used they have not used even their generation, fifth or sixth generation, which they have. They just used the third generation of the weaponry they have. And actually, it is not the nuclear program, finally, I must say. It is because of the ballistic missile capabilities and the drones that Iran have. That is what caused danger to Israel. And that is what America wanted to continue and close the work of Iran, that to halt not only its nuclear, but also its ballistic missile technology programs.
That's a very pertinent point you make there in terms of the aim for a regime change in Iran and the reasons for it. Sandeep, given that situation, is Iran in a position to continue fighting longer? The questions are, how long can it continue to fight? There are countries like the United Arab Emirates, perhaps, and Russia, the only two, one that are calling out America's alleged involvement or likely involvement. Two calling for a ceasefire. Are they likely to be heard? And how long can Iran last?
Well, Gaurav, Iran can last almost indefinitely. It's almost impossible to change a regime from the air. An air bombing alone is not going to achieve any objectives. You have to have boots on the ground. You have to launch a ground invasion of the kind the United States did with Saddam Hussein's Iraq in 2003. Of course, that was a catastrophic mistake. It was premised on false intelligence, that invasion. It should never have happened. Now, there is no country in the world today, Gaurav, that can
weapons of mass destruction. You're true.
200,000 soldiers to launch an invasion of Iran, and that's the only way that you can effect regime change in Iran. So, to answer your question, how long can Iran last out this thing? Almost indefinitely. It can continue as long as there is no ground invasion of which seems very, very remote. There is nobody on the horizon. There are just about 50 or 60,000 troops, U.S. Soldiers in West Asia across bases, and all of the activity that we are seeing, Gaurav, points to air campaigns, basically to bomb Iran into submission and to destroy its nuclear weapons capabilities. Of course, if the regime collapses, that would be a bonus. But I guess while people are talking about that, it seems very unlikely that the regime would collapse because of a wave of aerial bombardment. Gaurav.
What's the commentary in that region, Dr. Awad? Is America likely to join this battle with its B-2 bombers? Is America likely to target Fordo? Is that likely to, lead to a situation where Iran collapses? Are you looking at a regime change?
I think what the Iranian, the American are planning, Gaurav, is very closely watching because of the Azerbaijan. They have already using their airspace, and the Mossad have a huge intelligence apparatus inside Azerbaijan, and maybe they are using their airspace and refueling from Azerbaijan to attack Iran. A similar fashion also with American putting lots of pressure on Pakistan. And you know that defense minister is meeting with with the President of the United States in Washington, D.C. That's a clear indication that Washington wanted to use ground forces, even if they move their proxies in the region, to destabilize Iran. That's yes. Sandeep is right when he said there is no, border between Israel and Israel. But at the end of the day, they wanted the United States to take part in this war. And I am not naive to believe that the United States, including the NATO forces, did not usually actually attack Iran already.
Okay, so it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen what happens in the next 48 hours, which look very crucial. Will the United States use its military hardware? Is negotiation still possible? United Arab Emirates is calling for it, but how many more across the world will join that chorus? Or are there others on board that there will be a regime change in Iran? We will continue to track developments on that story very closely, but that's all I have for you on this special broadcast. Dr. Wael Awad and Sandeep Unithan for joining me here on this India Today special broadcast. Many thanks.